I hate trees, especially skinny ones. Whenever I see a tree that looks even the slightest bit too skinny or twisted, it's almost enough to make my heart rate jump from 80 beats to 160 in a nanosecond. The fact of the matter is that trees have become the very bane of my existence ever since I was a teenager. There was an event that happened to me involving a dark forest near my home, and two creatures that I cannot explain that has left a permanent scar in my mind and on my heart. When I was 16, I was fascinated with nature and all of its creatures. However, birds were the animals that I loved the most. Every time I took a walk through the forest of Illinois, I would find all types of birds, from ravens to cardinals. Sometimes I would even stand in the middle of the forest with my right arm outstretched, waiting for a bird to land on it. Surprisingly, this tactic worked on a couple of barn owls. I even got to move my arm close to my face and pet them a little before sending them off into the skies. It's times like those that make me wish I had never encountered it. One day, when I was walking through the forest, I decided to try and have some birds land on me again. I went to my usual bird watching area and held out my right arm. I stood there for what felt like hours, even though in reality it was probably just a few minutes. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, almost dozing off right then and there. Just then, I heard a squawk and quickly opened my eyes. I looked over to my right arm to find myself face to face with the equivalent of a mythical creature on my arm. I had attracted a black barn owl. I almost screamed in joy at finding such a rare animal, especially on a day like this since my parents weren't home. I slowly brought my arm to my face and petted the dark avian. It almost seemed to smile when I did that. I then asked it a question, almost like a child talking to their stuffed animals. "Hey, want to come home with me for a while?" Shockingly enough, the owl nodded as if it understood me. I smiled and started my walk home with the owl on my shoulder. While I was walking, I decided to talk to it more. I asked it if it was male or female. It then moved its wing in the shape of what would be the medical symbol for a female. I nodded and kept walking while talking to it. "You know, seeing as your feathers are tinged black and you're female, I think I'm going to call you Umbra." The shadowy bird squawked in agreement. I looked up and saw that the sun was starting to set. I hightailed it out of the forest before anyone or anything could attack us. Soon I had made it back home with Umbra in tow. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, turning on the lights. "Well, welcome home," I said, inviting Umbra in. She flew off my shoulder and on top of the TV. I walked over to the kitchen to fix myself something to eat. I asked her if she had eaten anything before she had found me. She nodded. I smiled, glad that she wouldn't have to go too soon. Eventually I came out of the kitchen with a turkey sandwich and a cup of mandarin oranges. I sat on the couch and was about to reach for the TV remote until I realized it was on the stand. I was going to have to get up and get it, but all of a sudden, Umbra picked it up in her claws and flew it over to me. I grabbed it and she landed on my leg and gave me a smile. I smiled back and petted her before turning on the TV. After about an hour watching TV, I eventually got a call from my parents telling me that they were almost home. I told them that I would leave the door open for them, and they agreed. I hung up and looked down at Umbra. "Well," I said, "I think it's time for you to head home. Could I possibly be able to find you in the forest again?" She smiled and nodded happily. "That's good," I said with enthusiasm. I went over to the door and walked outside with Umbra on my arm. I petted her one last time before sending her back to the forest. "See you tomorrow," I shouted joyfully. Umbra squawked and began her majestic flight back to the forest. I walked back in, leaving the door unlocked for when my parents got back. I went upstairs, changed into my PJs, and jumped in bed, almost immediately knocking myself out. The next morning, I was awoken by a tapping sound on my window. When I got up to look at it, I saw that Umbra was hovering in front of it, tapping the glass with her talons. I smiled and lifted up the glass, allowing her to fly into my room. Well, I said while yawning, you're here early. She nodded and pointed outside with one of her talons. I assumed that she wanted me to go with her for a walk in the forest. I told her that I needed to go and eat breakfast first. She nodded and hid under my bed. I went into the bathroom and got washed up before heading downstairs. I then told my parents good morning and that I was going to go for a walk in the forest. They said that I could go and to be careful. I then made myself a turkey sandwich and grabbed a bag of chips to take with me. I then ran back upstairs, slipped on some jeans and a black t-shirt before getting Umbra from out under my bed. I told her that I'd meet her at the usual spot in the forest and sent her off. I went downstairs and out the door. I decided that I would go over to my friend Isaac's house and see if he wanted to come with me. I walked next door and knocked. He answered the door almost instantly. "Oh, hey Jake," he said with a smile on his face. "Hey Isaac," I replied. "Do you want to go for a walk in the forest? I got something amazing I need to show you." He pondered the thought for a moment before deciding that he would go with me. I waited outside for him to slip on his shoes, and soon he came out a minute later, and we started to head into the forest. Along the way, he asked me what I wanted to show him. All I said was something incredible. He sighed, and we kept walking along until eventually we made it to the spot. "Okay," I said with enthusiasm in my voice. "Stand back, Isaac, and make yourself comfortable. This might take a while." He went over to a tree and took a seat on the ground. I stood under the hole in the forest ceiling and held out my right arm. After a few minutes, we heard a squawk and saw Umbra swoop down. She landed on my arm and looked at me. She almost seemed a little scared for some reason. Isaac, on the other hand, was completely astonished that I was able to let a bird land on my body, let alone one as rare as Umbra. "Can I hold her, Jake?" he had asked. I looked at Umbra, still seeming a bit frightened. Did she see something horrible? Did something bad happen to her? Whatever it was, I was going to find out after this. I then told Isaac that he could hold her, but to be careful as she was still a little startled. She flew over to his shoulder and looked at him, almost shaking. He slowly put his hand on her head, saying, "It's alright, I won't hurt you." Umbra soon began to calm down and got used to being petted by Isaac. He then sent her back to my shoulder. I looked at her and acquired a serious face. "Is there a reason you were nervous? You look like you saw a ghost." She then nodded and pointed with her wing to a giant tree, with what looked like an owl hole in it. I looked at her confusedly, but she just shivered and hid behind my head. I told her that there could possibly not be anything in there to be afraid of. I gave her to Isaac and started to climb up the tree. When I got to eye level with the hole, I pulled out my phone and shined the flashlight inside of it. The only thing that I saw was something similar to a small, cracked egg. I climbed back down and told Umbra that there was nothing to worry about. It was just a hole with what looked like a bird egg in it. "A bird egg?" Isaac had queried. "Yeah, but it looked like it had cracks on it." They both nodded, Umbra looking apprehensive. She flew over to my shoulder, still shivering a little. At this point, I couldn't help but think something was screwy. "Look, Umbra," I said, "how about me and Isaac camp out here with you, and we'll find out who or what is making you so scared. We'll deal with it." She gave us a weak smile and nodded in agreement. I told her to follow me home and wait on the roof. We all walked back to my house and Umbra flew up to the roof. Isaac and I walked in and talked to my parents about letting us camp out in the forest. We told them the spot we were going to be at wasn't too far from either of our houses, so we could hurry back if anything went wrong. They said that we could, reluctantly of course, and told us to be extra careful and to run back if we saw anything horrible. We nodded and then ran back up the stairs to my room to get everything we needed. We soon came out with 2 book bags, each with a sleeping bag, a flashlight with some extra batteries, and some matches. I packed a notepad for something that I wanted to try with Umbra, and I also grabbed the first aid kit just in case. I went into the kitchen and made a couple of sandwiches, and grabbed some chips and juice as well. We then headed to the door, said goodbye to my parents, and made our way out. As soon as I looked toward the sunset through the forest trees, I saw Umbra swoop down onto my shoulder. I patted her head before we all set off to the forest to find out what was going on. I wish I never got involved in the events that would unfold that night. As we made our way to the hole in the forest ceiling, we admired the chirping of crickets, the crunch of leaves under our feet, and the occasional sound of other owls. After 2 more minutes passed, we found ourselves right under the hole in the trees. Isaac and I pulled out our sleeping bags and set them up. After that was done, he looked up at me and said, "We need some light, man. I'll go find some rocks. You and Umbra go grab some sticks so we can make a fire." I nodded and we went our opposite ways to find what we needed. I pulled out my flashlight and looked around for some good-sized sticks to use for the fire. Umbra was still on my shoulder, watching as I collected the twigs of wood. Soon, I felt like I had collected enough sticks and headed back to the campsite. I saw that Isaac hadn't made it back yet, so I sat in my sleeping bag with Umbra on my lap. We waited for 3 minutes, then 4, and then 5. At that point, I started to get worried. I soon got up and told Umbra to hide inside the owl hole that I had investigated earlier. She shook her head violently, and I was about to ask why when I remembered why I wanted to try. I looked through my bag and pulled out the notepad and a pencil. I gave the pencil to Umbra and asked why she was so afraid. She grabbed the pencil in her talon and quickly began to write. She then dropped the pencil in my hand and pointed toward the notepad. What she wrote was nearly illegible, but I still managed to read it out loud. "The man in white stalks these woods," I said with curiosity. The man in white? I didn't know what it was, but something told me that it was an urban legend that Umbra had heard while flying around or something. I told her that whatever this man in white is, it's just a legend. I then told her to fly into the hole and that I would be back in a few minutes. I gave her a quick pet and she then flew into the nest, turning so that I could see the glow of her eyes. I smiled at her and ran off to find Isaac. I walked through quickly, looking for any trace of my best friend. If anything happened to him or Umbra, I would never forgive myself, I thought. While I was thinking about what could have possibly happened to him, I tripped over something. When I got up and shined my light to see what it was, I saw that it was a pile of small rocks. I contemplated whether these were the rocks that Isaac was getting or just a random pile. That's when I heard the scream. I turned around and quickly ran back to the campsite, only to find Isaac bleeding with multiple scratches on his forehead. I quickly checked his pulse and to see if he was breathing, and found that he was still alive, just unconscious. I then remembered that Umbra was still up in the tree. I immediately climbed up the tree and shined my light in the hole to see that Umbra was gone. The egg that we found earlier had also broken open. I looked at the back of the hole to see some kind of symbol. It looked like an X with a circle surrounding it, and it seemed to have been clawed into the tree, giving it a very sketchy look. I jumped back down and called out to Umbra, getting no response. I then called out again, feeling sick to my stomach. Soon, I heard a loud squawk and looked up at the trees, shining my light on the branches. When I saw what I did, I nearly screamed. There was some kind of black owl creature sitting there, staring at me with threatening white eyes. It seemed to be a lot bigger than a normal owl, and it was holding something in its mouth. It dropped down on the ground, and seeing what it was made every pint of blood in my body go frigid. It was Umbra's head, which was eyeless and stuck in a screaming expression. I looked back up at the owl to see that it had its huge wings spread, and when I took a close look, I saw that the symbol that was inside the tree was on the other side of its wings. It then took off and flew over me. I yelled at the owl to get back here and began to give chase. After running for a certain distance, however, I began to get a headache and started hearing what sounded like static. I looked around to find whatever was causing the horrible noise, until I finally found it. After seeing it, this thing now haunts my every waking dream. It was the man in white. It had on a black suit with a white tie. It was thin, and there were several tendrils protruding from its back. It looked to be at least 7 or 8 feet tall. The worst thing about it, however, was that it had no face. It just looked to be blank and empty, like the owl's eyes. Speaking of the owl, it landed on the man in white's shoulder, leading me to think that it was probably its pet or some kind of ally. Those were the last thoughts I had before I passed out from that droning, static noise. When I woke up, I found that I was at home in my bed. Looking toward the window, I saw that the sun was starting to rise. I was about to get up and find out what happened, but my parents and Isaac's parents came in, as well as Isaac himself, with bandages wrapped around his head. They asked me how I was feeling, and I said that I was fine. I then asked them what happened yesterday. They all sighed and said that they didn't know. All that they knew was that they found me and Isaac passed out near the camping area. They had all apparently heard him screaming. After they heard that, they came to look for us and found us passed out near the campsite. They asked what had caused us to faint and why Isaac was injured. He looked at me and shook his head, almost telling me that I shouldn't say anything. I lied and told them that I didn't know. I then said that I heard some weird static-like noise before I was knocked unconscious. Our parents looked at each other and shrugged, then nodded at me. They, along with Isaac, walked out of my room, telling me to get some rest. I decided that they were right and closed my eyes and drifted back into the realm of sleep. I don't know if the creatures I had encountered were hallucinations or what, but I did know one thing. I was going to stay away from forests for the rest of my life, especially the one near my house, as I had a weird feeling about it now. It took away a friend that I had only met 2 days ago, so it definitely would hurt to go back there. But still, even today I have to wonder, is the man in white still in there, waiting for his next victim? Maybe, maybe not. All I can say is, I'm glad Isaac and I made it out of there alive. And Umbra, I hope you're in a better place.